Hey, and welcome to the Transition Discovers Learning Series. This video is all about supporting cross-agency collaboration. Let's talk about a few housekeeping items before we get started. First, this video is designed to be interactive. That means that you will watch and at different points pause the video in order to practice new skills. After each pause, we'll continue with new content. The time points of these pauses are listed for you in the video description in case you have to start this video over at any point. All practice activities will be done within a worksheet that you'll need to download from the online course. The video will tell you when and what to download for this activity. Finally, we recommend pausing the video if you need more time to engage with any of the text content shown. This video will be broken down into two parts. First, we'll cover what is cross-agency collaboration, and we'll do this by looking at current models that support a clear and purposeful and carefully designed process that promotes cross-agency, cross-program, and cross-disciplinary collaborative efforts. Then, we'll talk about specific evidence-based practices to support cross-agency collaboration across the sub-indicators. Before we dive into the specific models of collaboration, including who's involved, what is done, and what the outcomes are, it's important to first unpack how cross-agency collaboration practices will range in their complexity. This will help us to visualize the ways in which knowledge, leadership, and responsibility are fluid across students, families, and systems. This continuum is adapted from how Dr. Michael Ward categorized the range of complexity in collaboration into 4 different categories. These categories are helpful to gauge how strong and embedded collaboration is between schools and agencies. At one end, we have information sharing and networking, which is often where IEP teams stop when it comes to cross-agency collaboration. Services are identified in the community, and youth are referred or families are given information on how to complete an intake process. Cooperation between schools and agencies in cross-agency collaboration can look many different ways, and the practices we'll cover in this video will give you a few concrete examples of that. Essentially, though, it is when agencies and schools have an existing relationship based in regular contact with one another, where planning for youth happens jointly and activities or programming by each partner are created to meet specific needs out of that regular contact. Programming might contain one or more parts that are exclusively designed and provided by one of the partners, and different agencies might cooperate to provide their own set of services in a way that does not overlap. Service coordination necessitates more support and facilitation from professionals on the IEP team to support youth and their family to follow through with an intake process and initiation of services or a service timeline with agencies. In coordination, each partner is providing a component of a larger approach, for example, youth-led transition planning, that without the engagement of all members would not be possible or as effective. Collaboration will look a lot like schools and agencies functioning as one team that cannot be differentiated from an outside observer. Resources are merged and problem solving happens jointly because problems are seen as shared work to figure out together. We'll come back to this range as we explore different cross-agency collaboration practices that can support youth and families in having a successful transition to adulthood. Remember way back in science class when we all learned about how cells are these incredibly complex, self-contained entities made up of many parts working together toward a common goal? Well, cross-agency collaboration is a lot like the cell in that it's better explained as an integrated system. Remember the nucleus, the DNA information and control station of the cell? Well, in cross-agency collaboration, our nucleus and DNA are made up of the goals for post-secondary education, employment, independent living, and community engagement that young people with disabilities and their families have. They are the main information station that gives us the guidance we need on potential practices, services, supports, and learning opportunities that can best support them in reaching their transition goals. Taking one step outward, we have the IEP team, which is comprised of teachers, support staff, administrators, agency staff, and school counselors, who together share information, cooperate, coordinate, and collaborate in order to ensure opportunities for youth and families to take leadership roles in transition planning. The IEP team works with youth and families to write transition educational goals for the IEP, which is our transition DNA, and then works to identify transition activities that align with those goals. Importantly, members of the team support skill and knowledge building opportunities for youth and family before IEP meetings so that they are prepared to be leaders in the transition process rather than passive recipients. See those dotted lines in our model here? Well, these show that all of the layers are fluid to the transfer of knowledge, leadership, and responsibility. If we view our transition village or cell through current evidence-based models of collaboration such as circles, we realize that there are many different layers within this ecology of partners and that there are some missing players on the field. So, who are they? Taking another step outward, we also need state and community partners to serve as appointed representatives on school teams. In a circles approach, just like the IEP team, the school team might meet regularly with young people and families in order to work on identifying transition goals and related services or learning opportunities that help them to reach them. And then they work with the IEP team to refine those goals and activities. Here is an example of moving from coordination to collaboration with schools and agencies functioning as one team that cannot be differentiated from an outside observer. School teams can also support pre-work in developing IEP goals by providing access to skill and knowledge building opportunities beyond or within the school to youth and their family before IEP meetings. Teachers, support staff, administrators, agency staff, and school counselors are all likely to be on a school team. So what about districts? Well, research on evidence-based practices tells us that transition is most effective when the district provides and supports professional development and funding opportunities for school personnel to increase their use of evidence-based practices. Districts also need to support leadership opportunities for youth and families to establish active decision-making in how programs, services, and supports for transition-age youth in the district are designed and implemented, and this might take the form of youth councils or local parent task forces. Districts can further support the IEP team and school teams by providing funding and support for establishing and improving district-wide transition programs, services, and supports. The LEA staff, itinerant transition staff, psychologists, social workers, occupational and physical therapists are all potential partners. State and community partners should collaborate in order to identify and address areas of need in the community. This can result in changes in policies, services, budget allocations, or it can take the form of community outreach and education. The state education agency and technical assistance providers have the role of implementing a state plan that addresses gaps, includes strategies for blending and braiding funding from other resources, streamlines the transition process, and eradicates duplication of service delivery. This team provides information, training, and guidance to districts and to school staff on evidence-based models of service delivery that articulate practice with fidelity at the student, family, school, program, district, and community or systems levels. They also create funding opportunities for the development, implementation, and improvement of evidence-based models of practice in secondary transition. Successful transition outcomes across the lifespan are the result of youth, families, and a broad range of stakeholders continuously sharing information, cooperating, coordinating their efforts, and collaborating to form new opportunities. Culture, supports and services, levers, and the outcomes of the interplay between them all influence future growth and opportunity for young people with disabilities as they progress through their adult lives. For example, a student and family's social capital might impact the information and opportunities for services and supports available to them. Levers such as funding, laws, and policies at the state or local level might drive changes in how and where resources are allocated, which then further impacts the access and knowledge that young people and families have about transition services and programs available to them. At all stops along this cycle of influence, there are a broad range of stakeholders, and depending on where their engagement with one another sits on this continuum of complexity, the flow of knowledge, responsibility, and leadership can be equalized, leading to young people and families having greater access to an integrated system of supports that bridges between schools and the community. Hey, speaking of levers, realistically we know that who we collaborate with and what we collaborate on is often driven by the intersections of multiple policies across many levels of governance. Where one law or policy stops, another starts, and often many run concurrently to provide missing pieces or extend the work of another. Where policies begin, end, and overlap, partnerships change and new ones arise on the continuum of information sharing, cooperation, coordination, and collaboration. All right, it's time for your first pause and practice. What you want to do is open up the downloaded video worksheet from Schoology and download it if you haven't already, and then work on these two questions. First, in your own words, why does cross-agency collaboration matter? And then, using the range of collaboration outlined in this video, where do your cross-agency collaboration practices usually fall, and why do you think that is? So now's a great time to pause the video and work on those questions, and once you've completed them, you can resume the video and continue watching. Alright, let's switch gears here and talk about the sub-indicators of cross-agency collaboration and the evidence-based practices that we can use to support them. Having agencies in schools consists of organizations beyond the school system and individuals that are part of a youth's transition team who together support their goals for life after high school. And ideally, agency personnel in schools provide an inviting and welcoming atmosphere at the school, a place for youth to work and meet at their school, trusting relationships, support during IEP meetings and other transition planning meetings, and opportunities to help youth learn and grow outside of the school. To support agency involvement in schools, we can develop and implement formal and informal agreements between agencies responsible for the delivery of transition services with schools. We can coordinate the development of policies and procedures for service delivery and sharing of resources by both school and community partners. We can develop procedures for school staff to have a systematic way to include students, families, community members, and agencies at different levels of the transition process. So this could be when to invite different agency or community partners to IEP meetings, when to refer families to meet with agencies, and when to provide information or learning opportunities about what community partners or agencies can provide to families and young people. Then, we support direct service providers such as case managers, counselors, and care coordinators from each agency having an active presence in the school where they can visit on a scheduled basis with students and families, ideally monthly, in order to address transition goals around post-secondary education or training, employment, and independent living. If we use these three evidence-based strategies with fidelity and support collaboration between direct service providers and school personnel, then we can move beyond direct service providers only attending IEP meetings, sharing information with school teams, or coordinating services outside of the school for students. We want these things to happen, but the goal is for schools and agencies to work together to create new opportunities and supports. Transition Coordinating Councils are local groups focused on helping youth plan for life after high school by meeting regularly, sharing information and resources, and working together to develop new post-school opportunities in schools and throughout the community. Transition Coordinating Councils are co-led by many different people, including youth with disabilities, their family members, and stakeholders within schools and throughout agencies and community partners. They work to facilitate networking between schools, agencies, young people, and families so that they can identify potential support services and opportunities that might not exist or might exist right now in different parts of the community or region that all could benefit from. Transition Coordinating Councils can use evidence-based approaches to developing this shared vision of what transition programs, services, partnerships, and opportunities look like in the district and community. Some options include appreciative inquiry and community conversations. Community agency nights about employment are events where school personnel and multiple agencies reach out to youth and their families to share information and resources that help them plan for life after high school. Ideally, community agency nights about employment feature youth who have transitioned from high school to work or post-school and post-secondary education as speakers or mentors. Ideally, these community events also include many agencies that present all of their different resources, programs, and opportunities to youth and families, as well as one-on-one time for youth and families to meet with these agency or community partners to learn about services, supports, opportunities, and programs available to them. All right, it's time for your second pause and practice. What you're going to want to do is reopen, if you don't already have open, the video worksheet and complete these two questions here. Once you've completed those questions, resume the video and continue watching. So just as we talked about before when we were covering these different evidence-based models of collaboration and transition staffings are meetings where school and agency teams help youth plan for supports and connections to help them achieve their transition goals for post-secondary education, employment, independent living, and community engagement. Employment expos are events where local schools, community-based businesses, and agencies reach out to youth and their families to share employment information, resources, and opportunities to help youth get ready for work. For this pause and practice, think of a youth that you're working with currently, and if you were to host a transition staffing for them, who would you invite and what would your conversation agenda look like? Transition fairs are regional, state, and national events where transition councils or schools invite youth and their families to learn about agency information and resources to help them plan to achieve their goals for life after high school. And ideally, transition fairs include a team of school and agency personnel planning the event to meet the interests of the community, young people, and their families. It includes inviting many different agencies, community groups, and colleges to share information, and a chance for youth and families to learn about work, continuing education, and planning for life after high school. Take a few moments to read over how the PA Career Readiness Standards align with the sub-indicators we've been talking about. All right, let's finish things up with a final pause and practice. Work on these 3 questions within your video worksheet, and once you're done, upload that worksheet into Schoology.